it's like we said, 37 years later, God knows how many matches have been done in that one time. I remember, what was the first WrestleMania that you watched?
I think the first WrestleMania... So I don't know the exact first one that I watched. I know the first one that I remember watching was WrestleMania 20, where I sat and I watched the whole thing from start to end. That was probably my first, real WrestleMania experience. I probably had caught, matches here and there before that, but that was, my first, I'm sitting down to watch WrestleMania, and this is, I'm purposely watching it, the whole thing from start to end.
I still have the DVD of that.
It actually is my favorite WrestleMania match of all time. Also takes place during WrestleMania 20, and that is Benoit, Triple H, Shawn Michaels for the World Heavyweight Championship.
That's your favorite?
It's absolutely my favorite match of all time. Well, my favorite WrestleMania match of all time.
Yeah, I have to rewatch that one. It is really good, and none of us were expecting Chris Benoit to win. It's just, it sucks what happened.
Yes.
Eventually with him and the situation with his family and
yes,
just putting a black on his career and just and the business itself. But we won't get into that on this one. I want to let's do a happy podcast.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have time for that at some point, but not today.
Those three guys were the top of the wrestling industry at that time. I think that was 2004. Yeah, 2004. They were the top of the wrestling industry, and they just put on an absolute clinic.
Yeah, they did. And I think and Triple H and Shawn Michaels both were bleeding heavily.
Oh yeah. Triple H was really bad. And then you had Guerrero versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship, another great match, and probably one of the best WrestleMania moments of all time. Chris Benoit wins the championship. The crowd's going crazy, freaking streamers and ticker tape flying everywhere, and Guerrero comes out, and they share that moment, both two men in the ring.
I'm getting chills now. There's nothing that's the best possible moment that they ever had, and it was so organic, and they're both crying and hugging each other because they both did it. They were both the underdogs, and they did it on the biggest stage of them all in Madison Square Garden, and nobody will ever take that away from them. And and now they can't show it because of Chris Benoit, but but that was awesome. My friend Joe Marone, who I believe I will be seeing Sunday for the pay-per-view, he went. Him and his dad are big wrestling fans. His dad saw Bruno Sammartino in the Garden when he was a kid. Oh, wow. Yeah, Rich. He's told the story so many times that it was the 70s. And they saw Bruno Sammartino, and he saw Bruno Sammartino lose the belt to the Iron. I don't know if he saw this one, but he has seen Bruno Sammartino in the Garden and multiple times throughout his life when he was a kid. Mm-hmm. But the one when he lost the belt to, I believe, Nikolai Volkov, I want to say. Mm-hmm. And everybody was crying. He said, in the streets, grown men were crying because everybody bought into it, and he was their hero. He was the Italian-American hero in New York in the 70s.
Yeah, and that was the time where kayfabe, nobody knew that wrestling was fake at that time. It was as real as, what you saw was what was happening. There was no... it wasn't set up backstage. They weren't doing just stunts. They didn't practice, before. That was a real match, and you just saw your hero lose the belt,
Yeah. Yeah, it is Ivan Koloff.
Okay, yeah.
50 years ago, January 18th, 1971.
Wow.
Ivan Koloff delivered a Russian leg drop to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden to get the 1-2-3, becoming only the third man to hold the WWF World Championship. But this is when like the average title reign lasted for several years, like at least 5 years.
Yeah.
So like Bruno Sammartino, I think he held the belt for 8 years was his record. Which that will never happen again. We don't just people don't have the attention span. Like now, holding the belts for 6 months means something.
Yeah,
it's just crazy to see how far the times have gone. Where like an average title reign is like 3 months now, where back then your average was about 5 years. And like
it would be nice to go back to that, or at least not like 5 years, but like it'd
but
be
like
nice to see
2
hold the belt for a year or 2. Yeah,
yeah, a year or 2 would be nice. I like, but like I think Ivan Koloff ended up losing the belt after 3 years or 4 years because he got like so many death threats, and they were like, we can't like do this. Like this was when but this was crazy. If you went to certain countries, like people would, or certain cities at that, like people would bring weapons to try to attack the bad guy if they could, to try to attack the heel. Like, especially in the South American places, like Puerto Rico or Mexico, they would, like, people would get stabbed. Like, wrestlers would get stabbed by the fans. And people would throw glass bottles in the ring. I mean, they would throw garbage. This is all over this part, but like in certain states, like southern states or like Midwestern states and like the South American countries, they would bring like legitimate weapons to like try to like get their revenge for their heroes. It's just nuts.
Yeah, well, again, that was like, kayfabe was real. People thought it was real. There was very few people in that time that were privy to the fact that wrestling was, I don't like to say fake, because, it is...
No, it's a physical, it's
a stunt show. People do get really hurt.
Yeah.
But I guess, not fake, but set up. Or predetermined, maybe is the best way to say it,
Yeah, I would say that. It gives a business dignity.
Yeah. Nobody knew. There was very few people that were privy to that information, and so, and they kept kayfabe in and outside the ring. I mean, we've talked about this before. Like, you did not, if you were a face, you were not seen with a heel outside of, like, in a bar anywhere, even if that guy was your best friend.
They didn't even have the same locker rooms.
No. And if you were spotted, and you were punished harshly by management if you broke kayfabe. It was not a joke. So people thought it was real, and they would attack especially heels. They hated heels, Having heels
that means they were doing their job.
It means something completely different than it did back then. Heel heat now is like people are pissed off at you on Twitter, but like they know you're putting on an act. Back then you would, like you said, get death threats.
I believe Jim Cornette has framed certain death threats.
Yeah,
I've heard him talk on his podcast a couple of times. He's had certain death threats framed.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
No, I would too. It's a badge of honor. It means you were doing your job.
Now, and I'm sure there's marks today that still think it's, that the heels are actually assholes in real life, I think, MJF does a really good job of
he does.
On and off screen. Like, he's a heel all the time. He's a heel on Twitter. He's a heel when he meets fans, like, on the street. So he does a great job. And there's not too many people that are... I think because now wrestling is so intertwined with, like, charity events, they do Make-A-Wish all the time. It's really hard for wrestlers to stay heels outside of the ring.
I mean, the business just...
They're working with kids.
Yeah, well, the business got too corporate. Like, that's kind of what happened, is that it just became too corporate, too overproduced, too much of, just... It entered a territory where it was not supposed to ever be, and... it just kind of went the way that all big business does. So there's a handful of reasons you can point to as to why WWE is not what it used to be, and the main reason was becoming a publicly traded company. That's essentially what led to the beginning of what this is.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they've been a publicly traded company since like 2002, I think. So they still got away with like a bunch of stuff, but like now that, we're in a more focused world where people are paying more attention to that stuff, now it's, now they have to do certain things, and it's a bunch of hooey, because the wrestling business should not have, like, it's doing things that type of business should never have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least not with its performers. But, that's just the nature of big business. What are you going to do? America. So what I was saying was my buddy Joe Marone, and his dad, lifelong wrestling fan, saw Bruno Sammartino. People cried. He probably cried.
Yeah.
He went to WrestleMania 20, and he still has the chair, actually.
That's amazing.
Because, like, they would get in... Because, like, when you sit in the front row for these wrestling pay-per-views, they have a special chair, like, commemorating the event with, like, the graphics and everything. So he kept the folding chair. And he has a few. So if we ever do a wrestling pay-per-view at his house, we tend to see or sit on the chairs. Certain chairs. Some chairs he won't take out anymore. That's one of them. I think that chair he'll only do it on WrestleMania if he's sitting in it, which appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't have a chair. I've never sat that close.
I've never either. When I went to SummerSlam, I was pretty close, but we weren't we were still in like the stadium seating. We weren't on the floor with the chairs, but I was like pretty much level with the ring where our seats were. So I had a great view.
Oh, that's cool.
But I didn't get a chair, which it's fine. It was still a great night. It was a really good SummerSlam. I think it was SummerSlam 2007 because I had just gotten my driver's license.
Okay.
So it was a good show. It was fun.
I don't think I was watching at that point. I think I had stopped watching I think the first time that I stopped watching was about 2006 maybe.
I think 2007, 2008 is when I really stopped watching.
Yeah, around then. I think I had started it again. I think I was still watching casually. Like, I was still watching, like, the big pay-per-views if my friends were, like, hosting and we just, like, went to go hang out. Like, that I did for years. Yeah. But I wasn't watching, like, religiously after, like, 2006. Maybe, like, somewhere around, like, shortly after Eddie Guerrero passed, I, like, started, like, I stopped watching. So I would say, like, 2000 and... I would say, well, he died in 2005. So I would say I stuck around until probably around 2006, and then I just started trailing off.
I think I stopped really watching religiously around the time that Chris Benoit passed. And then I think WrestleMania 24, which was in 2008, might have been the last WrestleMania that I watched. I bought and I watched.
Yeah. Well, we watched those for sure. I mean, I watched just about every WrestleMania since I was, like, 15, 16.
Yeah.
Maybe actually, no. Probably younger than that. Probably, like, 13 or 12. Yeah, now I'm trying to pinpoint the exact time. But anyway, I had watched... I had stopped watching religiously around then, so there was just a lot of things that just happened in between that I didn't know. Like even the PG transition. One day I was like, "Why is it PG?" I think it had been PG for like a year or two at that point, and I had not noticed because I was only watching very casually. And I think one day I saw it and I was like, "What the hell is this crap? Why is this PG?" Like. But Yeah, he went to the show. He got the chair. I think the first WrestleMania that I watched was, I think it was WrestleMania 15. It was either 15 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
17 was the first one that I watched with all of my friends.
Yeah.
But 15 was the first one that I watched. That was when Stone Cold fought The Rock for the first time at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite match for the longest time. That's still one of my favorite matches. But 19 is the best one. Between Stone Cold and The Rock, that's the second time when we end up having the heel turn with Stone Cold, which even he has gone back and said he was just trying to make it work as a bad guy. And if he went back in time, he would have just given Vince the stunner and like just done the heel turn the next night, or just not done the heel turn at all.
He was too much of a fan favorite to be heel.
Yeah, I mean, you have to give him credit for trying to reinvent himself because he felt in his mind that the character was getting stale, and I appreciate that. But it was just one of those things that the fans, they just, even if they wanted to see it, just to see what it would look like as a heel Stone Cold, they just didn't have it in their hearts to boo him. They just loved him too much.
Well, the problem is he was already an anti-hero, so he was already kind of doing heel-ish things, but, like, he was fighting the man, so it was good, you know? So, it was, like, kind of awkward for him to be, like, a heel, because it's like, he's already an anti-hero, like, so what, is he going to turn into, like, a bad guy now? Like,
right, like, he was going, like, as an anti-hero, he was fighting the bad guys and the good guys at the same time.
Right. And it's like, if he wants, like, him being a heel is him, like, literally bowing to, like, the corporation and, like, being Vince's, like, personal bitch, which is, like, that does not, no one wants to see that. That's stupid. That's, like, just killing his character. It's making his character lame.
Right, I was going to say, it's out of character completely.
Yeah. So.
I mean, he said it, too, that he wishes that he didn't do that, but he tried, and it's not his fault. It just wasn't gonna work, and it was just one of those things that maybe it sounded good on paper, or maybe he had it in his head that it would go really well, but just in execution, you can't plan for how the crowd is going to react.
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
But yeah,
especially, like, again, because the crowd just didn't want to see it. Like, it's just, it didn't work. So, it was a good try, but
just close, but no cigar.
Yeah.
And then they had the invasion angle for that, which that was a disaster in itself. Which had they just not been doing short-term thinking and they had actually just waited a whole year, it would have been great. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah.
But but that was the first one that I remember. That was the first one that I remember watching fully. I remember the first one that I had watched endlessly, that I watched multiple times, was WrestleMania 12. I had just, like, my local public library had I believe we spoke about this before, but my local public library, they had, like, at some point in time, they started getting a VHS archive, and it was all WrestleManias, which I thought was weird, but I'm not going to tell the library to, like, change their selection. So I started renting all of their WrestleManias as soon as I could. I think I would rent the maximum amount of wrestling tapes to hold for the week, because I knew that I was going to watch them within that time. I think one time I had like 4 or 5 rentals, and I didn't even know that the library would let anybody take out that much stuff.
Yeah.
But we lived down the street, so it didn't matter. And I think but like WrestleMania 12, I was staying at my aunt's house and we rented it from her Blockbuster, and I like the Ironman match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Just that was another one of the best matches that I had ever seen, and I still think that holds up. That match is just incredible from bell to bell, and you really like. I loved how it was the Iron Man match, and the whole match went to a sudden death. I loved that finish. I loved that idea, and you have Shawn Michaels coming down from the rafters. That and then Bret Hart doing, just being the consummate professional that he is. Doing a hell of a match and working a really great match. He was hurt during that time too.
Yeah.
I think he tweaked his knee or something like that, and he needed to get another surgery, so he took time off after that match. But according to his book, him and Shawn Michaels were supposed to have a moment together after the match. Like, he was supposed to get up and they were supposed to hug and do a high and do a celebratory thing so that Bret could pass the torch to Shawn. Mm-hmm. And apparently Shawn Michaels went the other way and and he was being an asshole the whole time because this doesn't surprise me because Shawn Michaels in the 90s, he was not the best guy to get along with. He had a big drug and alcohol problem and everything, and he was just. It's amazing that guy was able to even work. There's been a recent interview where Shawn Michaels was asked about Shawn Michaels was either asked or he talked about the behavior about what he would have done now that he works with NXT as a trainer. He someone asked him, what would you tell your younger self? And he's like, honestly, I probably would have fired me.
Yeah.
He's like, I would have definitely given myself penalties, and I probably with my behavior, I would have sent me to rehab, and if that didn't work, I would have fired me. But somehow that didn't happen, and here I am.